Now to the latest in the Ukraine war. A lot is happening there. President Zelensky is under fire for corruption. A new report says he embezzled the aid money. A gruesome video has gone viral. It shows the beheading of a Ukrainian. And does the battle for Bakhmut have a winner? Russia says yes, Ukraine says no. We'll cover all of this, starting with the report on Zelensky. It was released by an American investigative journalist, Seymour Hersh, a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter. Recently, he was in the news for saying that America bombed the Nord Stream gas pipelines. And now he's dropped another bombshell. He says Zelensky and his team have embezzled about $400 million. $400 million. Apparently, this was done last year. Do you remember what else started last year? Zelensky began his sacking spree. He fired many top officials, all for corruption. Now the new report says this was done to placate the US and that American officials knew that Zelensky and team are skimming millions. They wanted the corruption to be more discreet. This is all in Seymour Hersh's report. He says CIA Director William Burns presented a list of 35 names to Zelensky and some of those people were fired. Zelensky was under pressure from the Americans, so he sacked some of his people. Then Hersh goes on to make other claims, like how Zelensky is actually using American funds to buy Russian oil. He apparently skirts sanctions and uses American funds to get the Russian oil. It seems counterintuitive. Why would he do it? So the obvious question is, how much of the report is true and how does Seymour Hersh know all of this? He says that his sources are anonymous US intelligence officials. But we'll never know for sure, I guess. So expect public denials and a veto on the investigations. But the truth may not come out anytime soon. And speaking of doubt in the face of disturbing information, there's a horrific video that has been circulating online. We've decided not to show it, and we urge you, for your own peace of mind, to not watch it. The video shows the beheading of a Ukrainian. It was done with a knife, allegedly by Russian soldiers, and they filmed themselves while doing it. It's disgusting and has rightly led to widespread outrage. Zelensky has compared the Russians to ISIS.
There is something that no one in the world can ignore, how easily these beasts kill. This video of the execution of a Ukrainian prisoner of war, the world must see it. This is a video of Russia as it really is. What kind of creatures are they? There are no people for them. A son, a brother, a husband, someone's child. This is a video of Russia trying to make just that the new norm. Such a habit of destroying life. This is not an incident. This is not an episode. This was the case earlier. This was the case in Bucha. Thousands of times. Everyone must react. Every leader. Don't expect it to be forgotten. That time will pass. We are not going to forget anything. Neither are we going to forgive the murderers.
He seems convinced that the video is authentic. So does the European Union. But it gave a caveat before proceeding to chastise Russia.
We don't have more information on the veracity of the video. Having said that, if confirmed, this is yet another brutal reminder about the inhumane nature of the Russian aggression. Killing of prisoners of war is a very serious breach of the Geneva Convention and demonstrates once more Russia's complete disregard of international law, and particular international humanitarian law.
And what does Russia have to say? These were the exact words of their spokesperson. And I'm quoting, "First of all, we need to check the authenticity of this awful footage. Of course, this footage is awful, and first we should check its authenticity, and then we could have a pretext to check whether or not this is true, whether it happened, and if it did, where and by whom it was done. But first of all, in the world of fakes that we inhabit, we need to check the veracity of this footage." The Kremlin has called the video awful, but it says the first step to do is to check the authenticity, and it sounds fair. But how long will this take? Also, who will verify it? If Russian troops are indeed guilty, who will punish them? Unless horrors like these are dealt with urgently, they will be forgotten and perhaps even repeated. As things stand, this video may just end up as another tool of information warfare, which brings us to Bakhmut. Another game of claims and counterclaims. Russia says it is on the verge of capturing Bakhmut, and like clockwork, Ukraine denies it. The Wagner group of mercenaries is fighting for Russia here. They're the ones leading the offensive. And they say they control 80% of Bakhmut now. To counter this, Ukraine has released videos. They show Ukrainian soldiers in Bakhmut. This battle is the longest and bloodiest part of the war. and it rages on. As for the claims and the stories, well, people will believe what they want to believe. That's the whole point of information warfare. Muddy the waters, blur the lines between truth and lies. Our next story is about Emmanuel Macron. Until some time back, he was called Europe's tallest leader. Now he's being seen as Europe's greatest enemy. Wherever he goes, protesters greet him. Here's the latest. What was that protester saying? We are here, even if Macron doesn't want it, we are here. Macron was on a 2-day visit to the Netherlands. On day 1, he was heckled during a speech. On day 2, a protester was tackled to the ground. These protesters have become like Macron's shadow. They follow him wherever he goes. And he's not helping the situation. He makes it worse with his comments. The French president has intensified attacks on the US. In the Netherlands, he was asked about his controversial comments on Taiwan, and Macron refused to back down. He said Europe has a right to think for itself.
France is for the status quo in Taiwan. France supports the One China policy and the search for a peaceful settlement of the situation. This is, moreover, the position of the Europeans, and it is a position which has always been compatible with the role of the ally. But it is precisely here that I insist on the importance of strategic autonomy. Being allies does not mean being a vassal.
Now, to be fair, he's right. Being allies does not mean being a vassal. But you don't say it on public platforms. You let it show in your policies, and you can't really achieve strategic autonomy by grandstanding. For that, Europe will have to reduce its dependence on America. But the French president is only making speeches. And in the process, he's digging a hole for himself. It started with his trip to China. Upon returning, Macron announced his plans for Europe. He said Europe should not be a vassal of America and that it should avoid entering into a conflict over Taiwan. Those comments have sparked a storm. European leaders are up in arms, and the US is trying to play it down, at least in public.
Do you have a response to him saying that essentially Europe doesn't want to be seen as following the United States' lead on China?
Again, I'll let President Macron speak to his comments. We're very comfortable and confident in the strong alliance and the strong friendship that exists between our two countries, and the fact that we have been working together on the continent, and elsewhere around the world with France.
But China is enjoying this. Macron's comments have handed Beijing the ultimate gift, a divided West over the issue of Taiwan. China has mobilized its mouthpieces, and they're all praising the French president. Consider these quotes. The Global Times said, the French president, and I'm quoting, the French president's comments were clearly the result of Macron's long-term observation and reflection. Some people want to construct a false Europe in public opinion, masking true European voices and interests. That's what the Global Times wrote. Next, we have the China Daily. One of his journalists posted this, and I'm quoting again. Mr. Macron's words about EU strategic autonomy and resisting a new Cold War and decoupling will also prove to be a brilliant decision. But here's a small, uncomfortable detail for the Chinese. Macron is not the president of Europe. He is the president of France, and even there his ratings are near a record low. The rest of Europe has not signed up for his plan. In fact, other European powers are in damage control mode, starting with Berlin. The German Foreign Ministry said it is worried about the situation in Taiwan.
Of course, the issue of Taiwan will also play a role in the foreign ministers' talks. We are very concerned about the situation in the Taiwan Strait. Of course, we expect all parties in the region to contribute to stability and peace. This also applies to the People's Republic of China.
Germany is treating this as a full-blown diplomatic crisis. The German foreign minister is traveling to Beijing. This was not supposed to be a high-profile diplomatic engagement, but now the stakes are higher. Experts say this has become a crisis management trip. The German minister is expected to deliver a tough message on Taiwan to Beijing. But it may not undo what Macron has done. Betrayed the divisions within Europe. They're arming Ukraine, but they may not do the same with Taiwan. At least Macron won't. He's clearly going soft on the Taiwan issue. So both Taipei and Washington cannot bank on European unity. With his words, Emmanuel Macron has handed a victory to Xi Jinping. The Chinese president has managed to drive a wedge between the US and Europe. Imagine waking up to that. Orders for emergency evacuation. And this wasn't a drill, it was happening for real. In Japan's Hokkaido, residents were told this morning to run for their lives. A missile was headed their way, and they were asked to run for cover.
At around 7:22 today, North Korea is believed to have launched at least one ballistic missile, possibly an ICBM-class ballistic missile, from an inland area in North Korea at a high angle toward the east.
There was fear and confusion. An alarm was sounded in Hokkaido, but soon the evacuation orders were lifted. Local authorities said they made a mistake and the missile was not coming towards Hokkaido after all. So the alert was a false alarm, and for the moment everyone is safe. But they got a chilling foretaste of what could be in store for them. They live in a dangerous neighborhood. Russia, China, North Korea, they're all spoiling for a fight. Today's panic was courtesy North Korea. They're testing missiles almost every day, it seems. It's become such a regular affair that the news doesn't evoke much of a reaction. But the events of this morning prove that the world cannot afford to be bored with an impending catastrophe. The people of Japan are living in fear. Pyongyang is said to have tested a new weapon, a new kind of ballistic missile. South Korea is worried too. For a week now, they've been trying to call the North. But the North Koreans refuse to take their calls. It has raised suspicions. Is Kim Jong-un planning something big, something more dangerous? What's on his mind? Does he just want attention, or is he trying to start a conflict? Tonight, we'll bring you our assessment, starting with the details of the latest missile test. It happened around 7:30 a.m. today, 7:30 a.m. local time. The missile was fired from a place near Pyongyang, and it fell into the waters east of North Korea.
Our military detected an intermediate-range or longer-range ballistic missile fired from around Pyongyang towards the East Sea at around 7:23 a.m. today.
Today is the 13th of April. Since the year began, North Korea has fired at least 27 missiles. So 27 tests in the last 100 days, and with each test, they're raising the stakes. It's not clear what kind of missile was fired today, but experts say this was a medium to long-range missile, and the timing of this launch is significant because this is an important week for Kim Jong-un. North Korea is celebrating his 11th year in power. He was declared the leader in 2012, 2 days after his father died of a massive heart attack. This week, North Korea is also celebrating the birth anniversary of Kim Il-sung. He was Kim Jong-un's grandfather, the founder of the country, its first dictator. He ruled for 48 years. And his birthday is the biggest holiday on the calendar for North Korea. Pyongyang throws a big party and uses it for propaganda. It flexes its military muscle. And this latest missile test could be part of that. But Japan does not want this to be passed off as just another show of strength. Listen to what they said.
This launch is an outrageous act that escalates the provocation against the entire international community, and a series of actions by North Korea, included repeated launches of ballistic missiles, threatens the peace and security of our country and the international community. It is absolutely unacceptable.
Japan is calling it an outrageous provocation and absolutely unacceptable. But by all accounts, they'll have to brace themselves for more such acts. North Korea is clearly in escalation mode. This week, Kim Jong-un gave new orders to his military. He told them to work on war deterrence to make it, quote-unquote, more practical and offensive, whatever that means. This is Kim's instruction to his army. He wants more missiles, nukes, and weapons. And going by some estimates, North Korea already has nuclear weapons. It is said to have assembled 20 to 30 nuclear warheads, and it's not done yet. Reports say Pyongyang has enough material to build as many as 45 to 55 nukes. Apparently, Kim Jong-un wants to acquire specific weapons, like a multi-warhead missile, a nuclear-powered submarine, a hypersonic missile, and a spy satellite. Why does he need all of this? For deterrence and to use them as leverage. Remember, North Korea is a pariah state. It is buried under international sanctions. So nuclear weapons are a negotiating chip for them. North Korea uses them to get economic aid and also some sanctions relief. But of late, Kim has been feeling threatened by activities in the region. The US conducted military drills with South Korea, their biggest in years. North Korea called them a dress rehearsal for invasion. And these missile launches could be their way of responding to show that the North will not be a sitting duck. But it's still hard to say what Kim Jong-un is really after. The silence from Pyongyang is unsettling Seoul. Both sides have a military hotline. They have 2 phone calls every day. The idea is to check regularly to avoid flare-ups at the border. But suddenly, the North has stopped coming online. They're not taking those customary calls. And this might be another pressure tactic, pressure-building tactic. But the problem with such tactics is that they tend to spin out of control. The Korean Peninsula is already a powder keg. And with deadly missile launches and military drills, both sides are playing with fire. Now to West Asia and the land of oil and peace deals. Here's another one in the making, Syria and the Arab world. It's being welcomed back into the fold. Well, almost. Syria's foreign minister is in Saudi Arabia, the first such visit in over a decade. This follows an agreement. Riyadh and Damascus agreed to re-establish ties and reopen embassies. We told you about it recently. So what's Syria's minister doing in Jeddah right now? 2 things. First, finding a diplomatic solution to the crisis in Syria. Consider this statement from Saudi Arabia. The 2 ministers will hold a session of talks on efforts to reach a political solution to the Syrian crisis that preserves the unity, security and stability of Syria. A civil war has been on in Syria for more than a decade. It seems Saudi Arabia is trying to help end it. That's reason number 1 for the visit. The second reason is this. Syria is gearing up for a meeting of regional leaders. It will be held tomorrow. The foreign ministers of Iraq, Jordan, Egypt and the Gulf Cooperation Council will meet. The Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC, has 6 members: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar and Kuwait. They're meeting to discuss Syria's return to the Arab League. And what's the Arab League? It's a grouping of 22 nations. They're spread across West Asia and North Africa. It's an informal group. It was founded to promote Arab interests on the international stage. And Syria was part of this Arab League until the year 2011. But when the war began, Syria was thrown out. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was punished for inflicting atrocities on his own people. Remember, he used brutal force to quell protests. Millions of people have been displaced in Syria. Assad is even accused of using chemical weapons on his citizens. And Syria is under crippling Western sanctions. It got support from Russia and Iran, and that support has turned the tide in the war in the favor of Bashar al-Assad, in the favor of the regime. And the Arab nations see this. Assad has all but won this war. So they're trying to bury the hatchet. They're thinking about rehabilitating him and re-establishing ties. It would definitely help bring more stability to West Asia. Because this war has meant trouble for everyone. It has spawned radicalized fighters. It has led to a booming drug trade. The Arab nations want to put an end to all of this. They want peace in Syria, but it's not that simple. The reasons for Assad's international isolation have not changed. It's not like his victory can undo his past actions, or that the millions of Syrians who've been displaced by the violence are suddenly safe and prosperous again. So to avoid looking like opportunistic hypocrites, the Arab nations will have to balance their approach, which explains their division. Not everyone is on board on Assad's rehabilitation. Reports say out of the 22 Arab League members, at least 5 are against Assad's return. Morocco, Kuwait, Qatar and Yemen, they don't want Syria back. Egypt too is resisting the move. And they all have their reasons. But let's look at Friday's list of invitees again. Egypt, Qatar and Kuwait will be there. so they're attending nonetheless. Yemen's government is widely seen as a Saudi proxy, and it's Riyadh that is leading the push for Assad's return. So if Friday's talks go well, it's possible that the remaining opponents will fold. And if that happens, Syria would be welcomed back unanimously. And why is that important? After all, this is just an informal grouping. They don't really need a unanimous vote for Syria's return. But they needed to send a message. A united Arab bloc would be harder for the West to ignore. It could help reverse the Western sanctions on Syria. It's because the optics matter. And who knows this better than Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman? He's trying to unite the Arab world, to make it a global power center. He's trying to normalize ties with Iran, balancing relations with the US and Russia and China. Bringing Syria and Assad back into the global fold will be another achievement to his name. It will further burnish his credentials as a world leader. So you can see why Saudi Arabia is keen on Friday's talks to go smoothly. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Bolivia. Teachers in the South American country have been protesting. They want more funds for the education sector, but their demonstrations have turned violent, and police resorted to tear gas and explosives to deal with the situation. In the US, a massive fire broke out at a recycling plant in Indiana. Authorities have ordered thousands of locals to evacuate. Parts of the US state of Florida are witnessing floods. The situation is so bad that a person was seen swimming on a flooded street. In Colombia, one of Pablo Escobar's cocaine hippos died after being run over by a car. And finally, taking you back in history, what makes April the 13th significant? A dark day in Indian history. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre took place on this day in 1919. British forces opened fire on an unarmed crowd in the city of Amritsar, killing several hundred people. The brutal massacre of innocent Indians was a turning point in our freedom movement. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. The US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.